Oh, you people really seem to hate this movie, don't you? And for what reasons? Oh, that can't do. We're making an intervention. Welcome to Which Way Modem Man, Episode 0. The Joker 2 is hated for the wrong reasons. I think it's important to have a good hard failure when you're young. I learned a lot out of that. Because it makes you kind of aware of what can happen to you. Because of it, I've never had any fear in my whole life when we've been near collapse and all of that. I've never been afraid. I've never had a feeling I couldn't walk out and get a job doing something. Walt Disney. Before we begin, I need to make a disclaimer. If you're watching this, you either watch the Joker sequel or you don't care about the spoilers. If you like it, help it reach at least the levels of popularity of Lessons Political Maturity 0. Thank you very much. Chapter 1. The author has passed. As I said, a lot of people have problem with the new Joker movie. I will feature several channels which I usually agree with in terms of commentary, but for this one, I think that they are missing some pretty important elements of the movie. It makes their interpretation very lacking. So let's see first why they don't like it. Some people had a problem with it being a musical.
There are many issues with the film, but chief amongst them is the bizarre creative decision to make it a musical, seemingly created by people who have never watched a musical before in their entire lives.
But bro, we got the message, yeah? It was just sandwiched between a terrible musical and a bad story.
But it's more of a psychological exploration of the character through a lot of music, singing, dancing, performances, big musical set pieces that you all saw in the trailers. You could even call this movie more of a musical crossed with a courtroom drama because so much of the movie takes place in that actual courtroom you see in the trailers where Joker's facing trial over the events of the first movie.
Yes, it's a musical of sorts, and that's the worst part in it. I won't go as far as to say Joker 2 would have been good without the musical scenes, but it would have been better.
Now, I'm no great cinematographologist, proven by the fact that I will not look up the correct version of that word. But I know one thing. A movie is an audio-visual medium, and as such, changes in things like camera focus, how dampened sound is, and yes, even singing, tells us about the character's experience. Those things very rarely tell us about the narrative of the movie. They are a sensation-based way of communication. Now, I used to be someone who easily went along with what the studio wanted me to take the movie as. The first movie in a franchise that I liked, which I could instantly tell it's trash, is Terminator Dark Fate. And until now, I only walked out of a movie because I couldn't stand how stupid it was once. It was The Nun 2, by the way, and I've never watched the first one. I usually used to only realize that some movies were bad only after I saw reviews of it, and frankly, most movies or series which I watch these days are only because they are sequels of movies I liked or I watch a review of one. Regardless, I'd like to think that I improved on my commentary, and on this one, I have to say, the reviewers dropped the ball.
Looks like you dropped the ball. Dropped the ball. Dropped the ball.
In my opinion, why is it a musical is really a minor critique. There are a few more critiques, which we'll go over in a bit. I mean, have you seen the amount of channels I put in my opening? Okay. There was one more major criticism which, before I go into analyzing the movie, I want to address. That is, that the sequel's writers and producers hate the audience which liked the first movie.
However, what's kind of interesting is this is one of the few films that I could think of where I think it actually wanted to suck. Actually, I would say it's quite transparent that the writers and the director of this film didn't really want it to be enjoyed, especially by a particular group of people. The supposedly huge and very loud and annoying social media-based fandom for this film that many film and cultural critics, both professional and amateur, sort of have categorized as being lonely, sad, incel-type men. I think it's kind of weird that the filmmakers here would base almost the entire creative process of this sequel around that discourse, because quite transparently, that's what Folie à Deux is. Pretty much everything about the film is designed to piss this incel audience off, or piss off anybody who just doesn't want to have this discourse projected onto them.
This movie not only has no narrative justification for existing, but it also functions as a direct repudiation of its own audience. The film's fundamental misstep is that it hates the people who are watching it, which is a pretty significant misstep.
But the studios out there were like, too many incels liked this video. Too many incels liked this movie. So we have to get rid of it. We have to bury it. We have to make sure that we destroy its legacy, that Hollywood did this on purpose. Then you get articles from Rolling Stone. Joker Folie à Deux has a message for fans. Go F yourselves. Kudos to following up this billion-dollar grossing hit for delivering something more than a carbon copy of the Angry Young Clown original. But who exactly is this musical sequel for? Nobody.
Another criticism I saw of this film is that it is a film that is clearly written by feminists and hates what they did for disenfranchised men in the first film, and they want to undo that through Lady Gaga and her appearance and how they punish Arthur Fleck in this movie. I disagree.
And if you recall, prior to the film's release, it was quite controversial. And this had everything to do with the corporate access media, who was trying to will something into existence by gaslighting the world and pushing the narrative that this film would somehow lead to incel violence.
Security concerns surrounding the new Joker movie, the FBI, the LAPD, among those taking action.
Concerned that the new Joker movie could be used as an excuse for a mass. Authorities are taking every precaution to keep moviegoers safe.
These clips give us a pretty good picture that they do. The people who made the movie don't like the people who brought the tickets to it and made the sequel to spite them. Well, I have a problem with mainly considering the movie from this angle. I do support no hate watching, so don't buy the products of the people who hate you, but I'm sorry. I missed the part where I'm supposed to agree with the author of a book or a movie to enjoy it. If the past decade in media analysis taught us anything, is that death of the author is a thing. You made it, I have it, it's mine now. That's how property works. In fact, you know what? Putting all cards on the table, going all in, you know what? Here's the table, take it. Take the damn table. Okay, as I was saying, you are under no obligation to agree with the creator of any IP at all. I have on occasion embraced the philosophy of, okay, you're the expert, I'm the layman, I'm right and you're wrong. If the experts are in the wrong and you can stand your ground, there is nothing wrong with that. Since we are talking about movies and the author's interpretation, does anyone, for example, remember the Barbie movie? A movie which tried to say that feminism and gender equality are great, but it ended up with Ken being the most popular character? More than that, it accidentally ended up saying that if men found out about patriarchy, they could turn a feminist society into a patriarchy in a day. More than that, the only way to turn a patriarchy into an egalitarian society was to get the social rejects and outcasts into manipulating the average woman into thinking the satisfying life that they have is not good enough because they're not self-centered on their own lives enough. And finally, the protagonist of the movie ended her arc by rejecting the fantasy world where feminism ruled to choose reality. I mean, the authors can create stories which tell messages they didn't intend to do. For Joker 2, I have to say, if the writers hate the audience, there's some damn good haters. So let's see what our experts reviewers have to say. Chapter 2. Getting the movie wrong.
think Phillips did a masterful job of painting out how people are often made monsters because of the world around them. Gotham was brought down to its lowest point, and in this, two extreme sides were born. We had the Joker, who was the ultimate force of chaos, versus Batman, who's the ultimate force of order.
What? No. The first Joker was about a man who broke down and snapped given the failures of the system he's in and the inhumanity of the world. Then, after repeated dysfunctional ways of dealing with it, as he was spiraling down despair, he took drastic actions where he ended up murdering several people, and many in that same failing society sided with the idea of his snap and celebrated him for the symbol he was.
There we had a guy struggling with his mental health who'd been abused and let down by society. I think that's why a lot of people related to it, even if they didn't agree with what the character did. That's good writing, and it makes for a good villain. Here though, there's very little to actually side with, which makes the movie difficult to ride along with.
Why would you be supposed to side with the point of view character when he's so depraved? No, if you looked at the first Joker, and you didn't think something on the lines of, he's dissatisfied with the system, I'm dissatisfied with the system, he takes these monstrous actions and spirals off into insanity, what do I need to do to avoid that and actually succeed in improving things? If what you think doesn't align with this, I will have some serious question about how your mind works.
So I do feel like this smugness leaps off the screen, but making an anti-Joker Joker movie isn't really the best way to go with things. For me anyway. The first film, you had the iconic line saying how if he was lying down, you'd walk right over him. Butchered that. Phillips with this movie is kinda looking down on Arthur himself though, and doing the things he was critical of people for in the first film.
No, he isn't. And I will put a pin in that first part, to which he will come back later. In the first movie, the Joker, or Arthur, was a lonely and innocent man which was just mistreated and miserable. In the second movie, he's a convicted serial murderer who, except for the last scene, he leans into the fame gained by the way he did it. These two are not the same.
Unfortunately, in what's one of the weirdest choices of all time, we have this sandwiched in between a bad musical. I don't think Phillips actually understands what makes musicals work, and I don't know if it's ego, overconfidence from the Oscar nominations and stuff, but the guy clearly doesn't understand the staples of the genre. You don't have a scene yet, and then stop halfway through it to sing a song, and then continue as normal. The music's supposed to help the story progress by having the characters sing songs that portray their inner thoughts and feelings.
But that is what this movie does. It already does that. The musical segments are about how he processes the experiences he has, and especially the betrayal scene with Harley. Have we even watched the same movie? Okay, next reviewer.
It doesn't have a story to tell, it doesn't have a point.
No, the movie is a clear exploration of both the amplified spiraling out of control of the Joker and the idolatry of his persona. The spiraling out of control culminates in two stages, one with the firing of his lawyer and with showing up as the Joker in stage 1. The sycophancy reaches its peak during his breakout scene and the hallway scene, right at the end.
There's some cool scenes and a couple of the musical sequences have some really impressive visuals, but they don't add anything, and a lot of the musical numbers don't even tie into the scene that preceded them. They're totally isolated in Arthur's head, like in his fantasy, and they don't actually even relate to anything narratively.
The narrative is about Arthur breaking down. The musical scenes are about his progressing mental state. This wasn't a movie about Joker becoming a supervillain. Neither this movie, nor the previous one, even pretended they were going to be that.
So, the Joker's not even really in this movie. I'm just going to tell you right now, it's mainly Arthur Fleck just being sad. Like Arthur Fleck going through bad things. He is completely regressed into just the old Arthur Fleck, who doesn't have that Joker persona anymore and that, like, confidence or anything.
You're not supposed to want to root for Joker, you know? The Joker is a mask to show the effects that those kinds of actions have on people, both on those who take part in them, like for Arthur, and for those in their life. And the best scene for that was the calling to stand of Gary Puddles, which I might say, it's probably the best scene in the entire movie.
Why are you doing this to me, Arthur.
What? Gary, I like you. I told you I wouldn't hurt you, and I didn't.
Not hurt me. I couldn't go back to work. I still can't sleep, and I'm scared all the time. I never used to be scared. I'm scared right now here. It's you in front of me. Do you know what that feels like, Arthur? You were the only one at work who never made fun of me. You were the only one that was nice to me.
I said no more questions, Your Honor.
To be fair, he agrees. But there wasn't much else to the review other than describing the plot and saying, I didn't like it.
They took that character and broke it. Like, actually just, like, completely shat on what they built up for this character in the first movie.
The character was never meant to be aspirational. You were never even hinted at the idea that his actions were taking a right course of action.
Instead of expanding on it, growing it, or even exploring it in a different way, they just redid it.
No, they continued and concluded it. He snapped in the first movie, and in this one, he continued to snap in ever-increasing ways until the I can't do this anymore realization. Chapter 3. The character, the symbol. This movie has two main themes. 3 if you include the mental illness interpretation, which I believe is a minor one, but let's address it a little. It's a good rule of thumb that you don't use movies as a reference for actual mental conditions or science. If I wanted a documentary on mental illness, I wouldn't start a Hollywood movie where a character has a condition. Characters are there for entertainment. If I wanted a documentary on mental illness, I'd turn on some Discovery Channel or Related Frequency and wait for Morgan Freeman to explain it with his calm, soothing voice. Back to the actual themes though. One is obvious, and everyone seems to have got it, that of the celebrity status of the Joker and everyone being enamored and supporting the persona rather than Arthur, the man behind it. But the second theme continued from the first movie, was that of failure. Supreme and utter failure. Let's take them one at a time. The theme of fame and the symbol of the Joker. It's what motivated his supporters to get masks, to riot, to bust him out of the courthouse. Neat.
Neat.
You know what it reminded me of? That impotent rage which doesn't fix anything, just destroys the institutions they hate. The institutions will be rebuilt, but that whole attitude was shown very well in the second episode of Black Mirror. In that episode, all people we're shown in the society live in these dystopian, fully controlled societies, where you live in a box with TV screens on every wall and you barely scrounge by to afford to live, and the only path out of it that people have is to win a talent show. Our protagonist does so by having a revolutionary message and threatening to dive live on air for a statement. He wins the show, and that is reintegrated into the system as safe outlet for revolutionary ideas. He didn't change anything, he turned his outbursts into a product. That's the same way I view the in-universe fans of the Joker. Those who break him out, who cheered when he made his bombastic statements. These are fools, they're useful idiots hooked up on high of endorphins and adrenaline. They don't know how the system works, they don't know how to fix it, nor do they make any effort in any of those goals. They just want to rage. Well, rage doesn't fix problems, it's just spectacles, and it will be washed away by the powers in charge when they come marching back when you've exhausted yourselves. Like in the movie, on the staircase. They catch him soon after he breaks out, and the conclusion is that their revolution was a failure on every level. Speaking of failure, the second theme. How did the Joker become the Joker in the first movie? He has his substrate, his background of neglect by the system when dealing with his mental, atypical and dysfunctional habits and conditions. What followed? We have his attempts to socialize and make people laugh. Until now, everyone has dealt with this. So, in this part, he's still relatable. He fails because he's creepy and just off. What other failures does he have? He is generally inappropriate, and it gets him rightfully manhandled and punched by Thomas Wayne. He lives in his imaginary world and doesn't do a good job telling reality apart from what is in his own head, like his relationship with his neighbor. Okay, that is worrying. What? Wait, he what? He gets and drops a gun at the job he had where there were children present. Oh, that's bad. He got fired. Some of us may have some faux pas at work which got us demoted or fired, like not being careful enough with company information or pissing off someone in HR, but probably not something as bad and foolish as Arthur's situation here. Oh, he then decided to sulk in anger and bitterness, which resulted in him killing a TV host live on air. He also, in the same progression, he killed several other people. Yeah, that is a lot of failure in the first movie alone. In the second movie, his big failures, building up on his past ones, don't really show very well at first, but there is his continued mental degeneration, aided by Harley's facade. Then, he just leans into the act when he fired his lawyers to represent himself. He went to court as a Joker. He attacked the image of his guards. Next, he broke down after their traumatic punishment, and his supreme failure is abandoning even the Joker persona. He was a revolutionary symbol he became when he snapped on air. He was going in the wrong direction. This dropping of the mask cost him his relationship, his case, him escaping undetected, and his life. So yes, failure is a big theme in this movie, and I'm actually shocked that nobody, literally nobody, brought it up. It's not only that the system failed him, but the action he took constantly made sure his life turned for the worst in episodes. I'm done with this section of my review. Let's see what the professional reviewers have to say.
And if you're inclined to look for themes in this film, it's an interesting insight into the intoxicating danger of celebrity and the vast gulf between myth and reality.
Yes, you got the symbol theme, but it was not the only one.
And I guess that brings me along to my criticisms, the biggest of which is the deconstruction of Arthur himself. The ending of the first movie saw him fully embrace his Joker persona, shedding the last remnants of his old, weak, victimized personality, and embracing the madness of the world around him. It was a logical endpoint for a man who had been desperately trying to swim against the tide for most of the film, and it was kind of cathartic to see him finally let go. It was a final fuck you to the world that had kicked him to the ground again and again.
Drinker. The Joker embracing his persona at the end of the first movie was not a celebration. It was the final stage of his breakdown. He became the Joker when he was at his most unhinged. It was not a culmination of his struggle. It was his supreme failure.
The courtroom scenes are basically just a dry recap of the first film, telling us things that we mostly already know, and destroying that awesome sense of ambiguity and unreality that made it such a fascinating story to pick apart. Now we know exactly what did and didn't happen, and shit man, it feels like such a waste.
You weren't given the courtroom scenes to clarify the chain of events. You were given them to see additional layers of how Arthur processes his breakdown. Drinker's review is short, so we can already go to the next one.
This movie is literally only set in two places, Arkham and the courthouse. As such, the film's entire purpose is to remind us what happened in Joker 1. Most of the scenes are of Joker reflecting on what he did in the first movie, or having other characters in the courtroom tell him what he did in the first movie. And the scenes that aren't revolving around that are just featuring the Joker and Harley singing old licensed music.
I believe I already made clear what the point of the courtroom scenes were, and there's nothing more insightful in the Cosmonauts review than this. No, wait. He's one of those people who wants to agree with the villain.
It helps that his anger with society and his frustrations about how the world works are very reasonable. It's very easy to find yourself agreeing with him.
His review switched halfway through to one of a Transformers movie. Don't ask me why. Anyway, next.
A movie with simply nothing interesting to add to what's already been said. It feels like an extended epilogue to the original. It rehashes what we already knew about Arthur Fleck, trying a smidge to add to his background and his present, but feels like a stalled car for its near 2.5-hour runtime.
We already know who did this. Okay, we're continuing on this theme, though this channel praises Joachim's performance a bit more and the cinematography.
The original film was very on the nose, with little implied but a whole lot explicitly stated, and so is this movie. But what little was actually implied, like how dark of a past Arthur had, is now exposed for the viewer to see and hear. The Joker character has always had a mysterious past, and even though the first film was an origin story, they stuck to his past being a confusing mess for him so we wouldn't know the truth.
Alright, so why include the courtroom scenes again? Though this version opens me up to saying that in the first movie, the ambiguity of it was much less about getting you to speculate what the real narrative of the movie was. It was about the experience of Arthur's situation and mental state. Was anyone frustrated by the disenchantment? Was for anyone the point to figure out the real chain of events? That was not the point. This gave me the same vibe as the people who wanted the origin story of the Avatar to be cooler instead of being fine with it not being told at all. Because it didn't need to be said. I might be a little too close to the point of the reviewers here, but at least half of them who complain about the movie complain about the courtroom scene. So yes, I will comment on the disenchantment of it.
What's wrong here, in my opinion, is the ending leaves Arthur with no real arc. He started off as a lonely, depressed, downtrodden, and beaten man, and dies the exact same way. It comes after he admits, explicitly, of course, that he doesn't see himself as Joker.
He wasn't meant to have an arc. The first movie showed the consequences of his failures and the actions he took during increasingly deranged stages of his breakdown, and this movie continues his downward path. He rejects those who want to help Arthur, he rejects those who want him to be the Joker, and he dies at the hands of a fan of his maniacal persona that he never truly embodied. This movie does a great job at what the series is trying to do. Next review!
Even though this movie is meant to be a direct sequel to the last movie, the vibe is completely different from that first movie. It's almost like he wanted to make another movie with the characters, but not really make a sequel to the first movie, just something set in the same universe with the same characters.
On the contrary, as I've been talking for the past, how long was it? 20 minutes? I don't know, I started working on this video 6 hours ago. It really gives me the vibes that it will be one of those low effort, high reward ones, but the sequel is incredibly consistent with the first movie, with only aesthetic differences and the fact that it doesn't double down as the Joker as the narrative point, but the themes are consistent. Oh, this reviewer also puts extra emphasis on how it has very little in common with the source material, and I'll give him that. I don't like when companies do that. Still, doesn't make the movie bad for what it tries to say, and I do think that a lot of people approach the movie frustrated that it didn't do something it never attempted to do, and they ignored even the elements from the first movie that set the stage for the new one. Next person.
It was a slow burn that led to an open ending that was meant to be debated till the end of time, until now. Because Joker Folie à Deux, which I'm going to call Joker 2 for the rest of this video, answers a lot of those questions definitively.
I'm just sewing this at this point to show how many large channels have the same kinds of criticism.
Joker 2 comes off as if it's apologetic for its predecessor. It's almost a troll. And for all I know, it is. Now, if it's Todd Phillips trolling Warner Brothers, respect. I can see him telling Warner Brothers, I don't want to do a sequel unless you give me a $200 million budget and I'm going to make it a musical. You're giving me the money? Of course the Access Media is spinning it's a troll of the audience. Well, if that's the case, bold move, Warner Brothers, trolling the people who supported the Joker while the Access Media was attacking you.
Okay. You've seen that I featured Nerdrotic in some other sections, I'm keeping it short at this point. Next reviewer. This guy just commented on the fact that the movie opened with a cartoon, which made it seem like it will have a different tone, and the fact that there being police brutality doesn't save the movie. I had no clips to feature of him. Matt Walsh mainly talked about the financial performance.
Sequels in general are notoriously awful in most cases. There are rare cases where a sequel meets or even exceeds the original in terms of its quality, but those are almost always sequels that were planned from the beginning, before the first movie was even released. Godfather 2, the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and so on. If the sequel is a continuation of the story, a part of the filmmaker's original creative vision for the project, then in those cases it might turn out well. But sequels that were not planned, that the filmmaker did not have in mind, and were only conceived after the fact as a way of capitalizing on the unexpected success of the original film, those sequels are terrible in literally every case.
Fair point. And something to keep in mind. As you've seen in this video already though, I think that this movie did that rather well.
In the second half, it turns into kind of a courtroom drama where they literally relitigate the events of the first movie, basically recapping what everybody saw in that film. They're just like telling the story again.
Many people had that complaint. Chapter 4. A supervillain movie. What a lot of the critics and audience wanted was for the Joker to be the comics Joker, the supervillain who has this philosophy of chaos that he was in the Heath Ledger version. Let's see them do it.
In the end, though, it kind of doesn't even feel like we should be referring to the series as Joker, because it's not a story about the Joker. The guy's in a criminal mastermind, doesn't ever fight Batman, and in the end, he isn't even really the Joker.
That's it. They don't get any punishment for that or anything, which that's not a satisfying conclusion. Arthur is a bad guy. The Joker is a villain. But I don't think it's necessarily the right call to have other villains beat him up, rape him, and those villains are fine at the end of the movie. There should have been a moment where the Joker comes out and he kills those guards for that, or something to that effect.
He's simply Arthur, meaning his self-discovery really led absolutely nowhere. The only takeaway is he was the inspiration from the real Joker to come into being. This, in a lot of ways, makes sense. Arthur isn't just mentally ill, he's also not very bright. So how could this guy ever be the arch nemesis to the world's greatest detective? How could he become the clown prince of crime?
But everything he did to build up Arthur Fleck into the Joker is completely undone. While the presence of the Joker is still there, we're right back to pathetic Arthur Fleck.
Maybe you were just interested to see what the future of that Joker character was going to be, how he grew, what kind of Batman lore we would see in the universe in the future. Then you will be sorely disappointed in this film.
You know what the Joker 2 movie I would have loved to watch? Joker breaks out of prison, or something happens in the prison, introduces another character that we haven't yet got a great origin story movie on yet. I would have paid to see that.
Basically, the only good review of the movie I've seen is Asuka TV's, who likes the movie.
I was shocked when Arthur, dressed in his full Joker getup, completely broke character at the end of the film during his trial's closing statement. I genuinely thought that he would completely adopt the Joker persona, just as we see in the brilliant analog horror series Alice in Dreams. But he doesn't. He has a moment of lucidity in the chaos and finally comes to express the emotions he just couldn't before. He just wants to start over. This is what the audience wanted and expected. To see some action. And more importantly, to see a psychotic person does bad things, as we all have grown so accustomed to in the media we consume. But instead we are given musical numbers and a ton of dialogue. Instead, we are shown a character study of a single man, Arthur Fleck. If the first film was the origin story of the Joker, then the second one is the origin story of Arthur Fleck. Not the symbol, but the human. And not only does this bring necessity to the second film and make it viable as a sequel, but also completely subverts a film, the first, that was already a deconstruction on its own.
martial stances.
So going into Joker 2, when I heard it was a courtroom drama, right? A procedural about whether Arthur Fleck and Joker are the same person or a result of split personality disorder, I went, ooh, what an interesting idea. However, then I thought back on the first film and went, wait, that's not really valid. It was abundantly clear to everyone that it was just Arthur Fleck, right? However, I was very relieved to see early on in the movie, this is actually a manipulation, all right? Like, it is a crackpot theory that the lawyer is proposing, a lie, a scheme, basically, that Arthur Fleck's lawyer is coming up with to basically get him out of trouble, get him out of the death penalty. And Arthur Fleck, as a result, needs to decide whether he's willing to lie and manipulate his fans and a jury to get away with what he did in the first movie or avoid the death penalty, right? And I found that idea really interesting. And personally, I thought the journey that Arthur Fleck goes on in this movie is actually rather more deep than people talk about. I think a lot of people have said that he is a static character. He ends the movie in the exact same place he started. And I kind of disagree, at least to an extent.
And
when he finally finds her on the iconic staircase, she wants nothing to do with him. She tells him that it's all just a fantasy. It's always been the Joker that she loves, not Arthur, and he threw away that fantasy, so the Joker's not real. It's only Arthur, and she leaves. It's all just a fantasy. Get the f*** out of here, Buster.
So he just said all of that, and I'm still waiting to hear the problem with the ending of the movie. He just described the ending of the movie, but doesn't even point out an actual problem.
Conclusion.
Okay, so why does it not fit? Are you gonna elaborate, or are we just gonna hear you say it's bad with no actual reason as to why it doesn't fit thematically? Earlier in the video, I explained why it does fit thematically and why it does make sense it ends the way it does, and you give me nothing. There's no criticism here, it's just a statement with no elaboration.
No, the movie is perfect.
It's not perfect.
It is perfect.
Why is it perfect?
Goodbye.
you know, there's something funny about this wanting a supervillain aspect. In days before I saw this movie, I began watching some shorts on the theme of if evil geniuses had common sense.
Alright, so here's the plan. We'll use my teleportation gun to portal our way into the bank's inner vault. I'll activate our invisibility suits so we don't trigger any motion sensors, and then I'll use my time machine to freeze the guards in time so they don't attack us. Then use my mind reader device to find out the safe combination, shrink down all the money using my shrink ray, teleport it back to the hideout, and then use my cloning machine to clone all the money we just stole. Does everyone understand the plan so far? Hey boss, I have a question? Yeah, go ahead. What the f is wrong with you? Are you asking me that? You just listed off 6 seemingly impossible inventions, and the best use case you can think of is stealing a goddamn bank vault?
Their conclusion was, if you wanted money or world influence, why don't you sell your inventions? You literally invented teleportation and so many other science fiction technologies. How could you not just put them on the market? You'd become a billionaire. Now, I believe that this reaction perfectly encapsulates the problem both with this movie's review, with the Joker's in-universe supporters, and with the superhero genre as a whole. They're not interested in reality, only in spectacle. Seriously, on the one hand, you have the issue, which comics is definitely guilty of, that they can just invent a new power or a new MacGuffin to find a solution. I mean, that's basically what Captain Marvel was for Thanos, and there was a lot of bad writing in that as well. There's also characters that don't react well to danger, like how in Anime Logic, spitting blood after a punch is not a big deal, when in fact it's extremely worrying. And yes, there are villains whose motivations and plans make no sense or are simply on a scale and of a nature disconnected from reality. There are entire channels dedicated to comparing fiction with reality, like Doctor reacts to shows about doctors, or Lawyer reacts to show about lawyers, and so on. All of this. The fact that we approach fiction like pure consumers, willing to accept the fictional logic, keeps us impotent about real-world solutions to real-world problems, like the one the first Joker movie was praised for bringing light to. Stop expecting supervillains. Stop expecting superheroes. They're just rotting your brain. Now, this isn't the first time which I write a script on this theme, but it's the first one I decided to release. Do I have any solutions? You could actually say that. This video is a movie review, but I as a channel and not a media channel. I'm a political channel. I focus on the nuances and complexities of real-world histories, ideologies, and activist movements. Currently, I only have 4 videos released since the end of my hiatus, but in each and every one of them I aim to elevate the conversation in what we focus on, what we're aware of, what myths we believe, why they don't work, and what can we do to have better lives in terms of political organization. There's also what videos like this will do in terms of our inner lives and understanding of stories we tell ourselves and to others. This is the opening episode of my series Which Way, Modem Man? Not Modern Man, Modem. What a Modem Man is, I will tell you in the future, but in short, it is the type of man who has problems not knowing how to interact organically with the rest of the world. And that's all the details I'll give for that now. My other series, that of which I have 4 videos released, is Lessons in Political Maturity. Currently, I started a project where I'm showing you why I think the left wing of politics is both discredited and illegitimate. You can watch 2 hours of it already, and I'm not even done with chapter 1 out of 21, so you can imagine how much I have left to say. I spoke in this review a lot about failure and impotence. Something I haven't yet spoke of is that, for example, the myths that I'm trying to refute and clean the ground of have higher stakes than we realize. I already spoke how the Joker supporters do not know how to fix the problems of the system they revolt against. However, there are many more ways in which this failure can manifest. There's a reason I opened my video with that Walt Disney quote, and there's a reason I criticize channels which I generally like and became very successful. I'm not saying that these people are guilty of that, but sometimes it can happen that people gain a whiff of success in their life and they let it go to their heads, believing that they are unbeatable and their ideas can't be wrong, and as such, they remain stuck in a mindset which cannot adapt to the challenges that they're facing and become complacent in their own little corner of fame. I've seen it happen to some people, and it's really disappointing how self-important yet ineffective, arrogant and dramatic they become. People who could be relied upon, now only reliable being predictably foolish. I won't name any names, but it's something I hope this community will gain an immunity for. What I aim to explore is ways to overcome those attitudes and inadequacies, and I have plenty of ideas that need to get started, but as you can imagine, video editing takes a lot. Hell, this video and the spontaneous ones are exceptions which barely take 10 to 20 hours of work, but usually it takes me roughly 20 to 50 times more time to make the videos that you see from scripting, recording and editing than it takes for you to see them. That's even with all the corners I cut, and you wouldn't believe how many corners I cut if you don't pay attention or you're not a video editor. Point being, I could focus a lot more on finding and making these political solutions if I can rely on the content I'm making here rather than my real life job. In real life, I don't think I can easily rise above a cog in the machine level, and I'm not earning nearly enough to buy politicians or start and fund an activism institution or a fraternal society or anything. So until I can, what I'll do here will be more impactful than what I can do with my day job. I decided to only start releasing donor exclusive content, more than a few articles I have so far, after I reach 500 subscribers, and we're a little over 315. Let's see how close we can get. I'm not lacking ambition, insight or an adaptable plan, I just lack the audience numbers, and for that I need your help. If you like this video for its media analysis, more will come. And if you like the politics you find on my channel, that's most of what will come. Even my channel trailer, it's called Anthem of the New Aristocracy, so you know I'm aiming high. Go watch the movie if you liked how it sounds, share your thoughts in the comments, and please reflect on what I've told you. The new aristocracy will not build itself. And consider this: machines are managed, life is cultivated. So, which way, Modem Man?